everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on a very special chapter of Heaven Official's Blessing, Volume 6. I looked on my playlist on YouTube this morning and realized that this is the first time since starting this series that I've only reacted to one chapter. Everything else has been at least two chapters, maybe even 5 chapters. I think when I first started, I read a lot of chapters for Volume 1 because I just got off reading the Dongwon. I was like, oh, I know all of this. But this is the very first time that I am reading just one chapter for reaction, but it's chapter 190. It's part 100 in the series. It feels special, and it's 30 pages, and the next section's like 40 pages. So it really just had to be this way. But I have lots of comments to talk about, so I don't know how long this discussion will be. It's one chapter, so maybe things go down. Who knows? When we last left off, XIE LIAN was tied to an altar by Bai WuXiang, so with a bunch of people there, so who knows what could happen. I'm a little worried, if I'm being honest, but we'll see, right? So, chapter 190, we are officially right there. We're a little past halfway through the book. We have 2 more sections of reading after today, but something came in the mail today that I was super excited about, and I think it's Volume 7. I'm so excited! Somebody was asking in the Discord, they were like, how did you not see the cover for Volume 7? And I said, well, because I pre-ordered these really early, because there are several people on the Discord for Patreon that are from Europe. They've talked about how hard they can be to come by, and I know that I am very fortunate in the US that we have major publishers that are like all about publishing this because #capitalism, and I'm fine with that because that ensures that I get these books. But I wanted to make sure I wanted to pre-order this volume and then the special edition of Volume 8 because I wanted them to come without me seeing the cover because I like reacting to them and seeing what it is. So I've been pretty spoiler-free with this series as far as the covers go, but this came in the mail today. I was super excited, so I wanted to show it to you all. And I'm like, well, we're only reviewing one chapter, so why not? But yeah, we got here. Ooh. This is, I noticed the green. First of all, I was like, ooh, greens. Lots of greens. But, It's WuXiang and XIE LIAN just casually doing calligraphy. What? Wait, what? They're just casually doing calligraphy here. No big deal. Oh, what is this? This looks like we've had different little symbols at the corner of the books. The last one was a Ming. We've had a butterfly, a flower, which is the Wraith butterfly is for WuXiang. The flower is XIE LIAN. We've had the red pearl, which ties back to that in Volume 3. And Volume 4 was the pieces of calligraphy that were on the desk when they were making out. And then we had the red maple leaf, which ties back to WuXiang, and then we had Ming. But this is a lantern. A greenish lantern. I mean, it doesn't look like a lantern. It doesn't look like the lanterns that we've seen in the festival, so it looks like an ornate one that you would have in a home. Very curious. And they're in like some place. There's lanterns hanging. I guess that's what that is. And they're just practicing WuXiang's calligraphy, which is pretty bad. So, but this looks so tame. Compared to all the other chapter covers we've had, even the hug from last volume, this is like the tamest cover of them all. I don't trust it. I don't trust this at all. No, because usually this series, things are not as they appear. It looks pretty hefty. How is it? Is it thinner than the last volume? Is it about the same? It is. I'm going to compare them. It looks like it's less than this volume. This volume is short enough. Like what? Why? How many pages is this? The last volume is 348. This one is only 336. Why are the volumes getting smaller, MXTX? Why are the volumes getting smaller? I don't like that. Although we can't really judge a book by its cover. I was really mad that Volume 6 was shorter than the other volumes, and here we are. But this volume is shorter than Volume 6. This is the smallest volume so far. Volume 8 had better be huge. Volume 8 had better be just like enormous, but it probably won't be. It's funny, usually an author gets smaller, gets bigger in text as they write, and this one gets smaller, but looks can be deceiving. So I do want to see what is on the cover Ooh, it is in this beautiful, like, ornate place, like, looks like a sanctuary. I don't know. We need Xi Lian and Huachong to go to a place like this and be happy after all this stress and madness. So there's that. And then I always like seeing, yay! I was waiting for this. I have back on my shelf, you can kind of see it. It's a list of all, it's a little fold out and it has all the inserts for the volumes. And I've been trying to see which ones are which. So this one has him and Huachong going to the ghost city together. And he's eating like a little apple, it looks like, from the little ghost. And the ghost is super happy to get his patronage. Oh my gosh, how cute. Okay. Okay. Well, that's exciting. This seems so deceptive. I'm like, wait a minute, what? This seems deceptive. I don't know. I feel like by the time we end volume 6, I may have a better idea of what this means or how I feel about it. But right now, this seems very trickery. Seems trickstery. I'm like, this is the shortest volume so far. And it's the shortest volume so far, and it has the most tame cover. What do we do with that, MXTX? Is this just to trick us, to make us, to lull us into a false sense of security? I don't know. But for right now, I'm going to go put this on the back shelf. So give me just a second. All right, and I'm back. It is on the shelf now. I'm really excited because by the time I get all of the Heaven Officials Blessing books up there, the shelf should be about complete, right? I have down there, I have like, you can see Scum Villain and Modao Zushi like over here in this corner, which is fun. I'm excited to get the Scum Villain, but I don't want to do that until I get through Heaven Officials Blessing, obviously. So we need to talk about some comments real quick before we dive into this chapter. Kix K talked about how Xi Lian continues to fall into pits with no one to help him out. Yeah, it's been really hard watching Xi Lian struggle in these chapters, really hard. And knowing Xi Lian is young and impressionable and doesn't exactly, he's not the 800-year-old old man that we see now. It's definitely hard to watch him as a younger individual struggle with how to cope with what's going on with them. But Kixkay also says that it's funny, we tie back to Banyu in volume 1. In Banyu in volume 1, Huachong, Xi Lian dives into yet another pit, but Huachong is there to help him this time. It is frustrating seeing Huachong be powerless, and now all that discussion about Huachong being powerless and not able to help Xi Lian and how horrible he felt about it makes a lot more sense, and we understand it more. But it makes realizing that in Banyu he gets to catch Xi Lian and save him that much more rewarding. And where are they now? Why, they're in another pit. It's the kiln. So the big question is Huachong going to be able to help Xi Lian and save him from this pit? I'm saying yes, but this story is going to torture us until we know for sure, right? So I like that comment, Kix K. Jasmine noted that these chapters are what Jasmine dubs as the Huachong experience. We experience all of Xi Lian's pain through his eyes. Yeah, it makes me feel a lot more for Huachong now and him not giving up on Xi Lian. I really think that's true. Miss Angel talked about, Miss Angel had some really good pointers, like some callbacks that I thought were really cool. Miss Angel talks about how Xi Lian, when he recalls the wine at Paradise Manor way back in volume 2, which we'll see in the Donghua soon, that he notes how the wine can cause madness. And that relates back to chapters 184 to 186. It's like, yeah, Xi Lian accounts that he went mad after drinking the wine on an empty stomach and is like, oh, I probably shouldn't drink anymore like that, sorry. And now it all makes sense. And then in book 3, the Truth or Dare game, which is, I think, volume 4, we now know what Huachong meant when he was talking about the worst thing in the world is watching your loved one suffer and not being able to do anything. Yeah, it is the worst thing in the world. Like, Huachong has these last several chapters just watch Xi Lian get kicked over and over again, and they can't do anything. And it's so hard to watch, right? And then, this part was interesting. I had forgot about this, because I gave WuXiang a pretty hard time a few chapters ago. But Miss Angel talked about how technically, Xi Lian did break a promise to WuXiang. Xi Lian had promised not to tell others about the Red Pearl incident, even though they forgave WuXiang for it. But they had promised not to tell anyone, and then they ended up telling Feng Xin, and WuXiang was like, you promised not to tell, and Xi Lian was like, it's not a big deal. I will argue that WuXiang's character, and we've established this throughout the story, is very much the type of character that he takes things in very black and white face value. So if you were disloyal to him one time, he has the right to be disloyal to you, and it's even. But that's not really how the world works, right? It's just like, oh, well, you know, you broke your promise and you told Feng Shen about this red pearl, so I'm going to break my promise and not stand up for you in front of a bunch of douchebags. I'm like, that's a little different. I'm like, that's not the same. So I think in WuXiang's eyes, you can equate things very easily and in a very black and white term. But the reality is, no, things aren't always the same. One betrayal is not equal to another betrayal. And just because someone broke a promise doesn't mean you can break a promise. It depends on the promise, right? And so I understand technically where WuXiang is coming from because that ties in with his character. But theoretically, I'm like, oh no. But we talked about WuXiang last chapter set and how he tried to remedy things. SQQLBH314 talks about how, according to the Heaven Officials Blessing website, this story is labeled as lighthearted. Maybe in volume 1. after volume 2, it's like all Angst City. Volumes 1 and 2 I could label as lighthearted, but after that, no, not at all. They also talk about how every time, and this is kind of, again, we've talked about spoilers and everything. At this point, I know Ming, because people have hinted at it so much in this story, I know Ming is tied to WuXiang. It's possibly an extension of him. We've not had confirmation of that, but everybody keeps talking about it, so I'm assuming it's true. And so now it's like WuXiang scolding Ming is basically like scolding himself for being quote-unquote useless. It's pretty much been spoiled at this point, so I'm not going to dwell on it, but I'm just like... But then, at the Blackwater lair, XIE Lian asked by the campfire, he wanted to know if someone could see him rolling in the mud and still love him. And we know that's the case because WuXiang still loves him. So I'm like, I told Anime Annie and I told some others in the comments, if we get out of this book, if we get out of Mount Tonglu and XIE Lian has not realized that it's WuXiang and has been WuXiang this whole time and that he loves him, I'm going to take Ruyi and I'm going to strangle XIE Lian. Because I'm like, no! Get it, you dunce! I'm like, Bai WuXiang had a hard time figuring it out, but you don't have to be like him. I'm like, I don't know if Pei Ming, is he going to be like Jishin and be like, okay, look. We need that. We need Pei Ming to be a Jishin in this one, right? And then Lu talks about how WuXiang, I like there was a really cool comparison that Lu made with WuXiang and XIE Lian, or WuXiang and WuXiang, and XIE Lian and Feng Shen. So first, with WuXiang and WuXiang and WuXiang are both from similar backgrounds. We know they both have come from impoverished communities, and they've kind of worked their way up. WuXiang has worked his way up the Heavenly Official corporate ladder. WuXiang, we know, became a Supreme Ghost, so he had to get to that point as well. So what's fascinating, though, is that you have two individuals who both beat the odds, quote unquote, to become these powerful characters. But the thing is, WuXiang, in becoming a Supreme Ghost, sought to confront the system. He wanted to confront the system, defy it, break it, rewrite it, and was like, this system sucks. I don't like it. I want to change it. WuXiang, when confronting the system, just tried to conform to it. WuXiang's like, I don't want to challenge it. I don't want to change it. I just want to become part of the system and reap the benefits. And there's nothing wrong necessarily with that. Not every character is going to be a Mother of Dragons mold breaker. And I'm not asking WuXiang to be that. But it is fascinating that you can definitely tell why WuXiang probably has negative feelings towards WuXiang, among other reasons. Because WuXiang was confronted with the power to maybe change the system. And he was like, oh no, I just like the status quo. Let's just keep it safe. And WuXiang was like, especially when it came to his gege. So I thought that was fascinating. But also, I think that it's interesting that you have Feng Shen and XIE Lian, and the idea, and WuXiang, you have XIE Lian and you have Feng Shen and WuXiang looking at XIE Lian and comparing the line of the state of you versus you. So like WuXiang says, you know, he quotes XIE Lian telling him, he's like, it's about you, not the state of you. And WuXiang kind of flips that back on XIE Lian, and he's like blushing like, oh my God. But it really is something where WuXiang he just looks at Xi Lian as Xi Lian. It's not the state of Xi Lian. He loves Xi Lian for who he is. He loves him no matter what he is. He loves him whether he's a crown prince, whether he's a scrap collector, whether he's at the bottom of the barrel or at the top of the ladder. Huachang loves him no matter what. It's him that he loves, not the state that he's in. Feng Xin does love Xi Lian, but he keeps pushing for Xi Lian to be in a certain state. He wants Xi Lian to ascend again. He wants Xi Lian to become this virtuous crown prince that he was before, because then things will go back, kind of like WuXiang and conforming to the system. Then things will go back to normal. The system will go back to the way it was, and we don't have to deal with all of this new uncertainty. Whereas Huachang's like, I don't care what you are. I love you for who you are. Feng Xin, I'm sure, loves Xi Lian for who he is, but wants him to conform to this one mold that he once was. And that, at this point, we're like, that's not possible. That's never going to happen again. So I thought that was interesting. I'm glad you pointed that out, Lou. That was cool to note. And then finally, Anime Annie just pointed out that this series has so much rewatchability. And I'm really excited for season 2 of the Donghua to come out, because I have a feeling while we're on volume 7, because I think we'll be on volume 7 by that point, or we'll be starting it out, we'll have finished volume 6. And by the time we finish volume 6, I don't know, I just have this weird feeling that we're going to need some happiness. And going back to volume 2, when it's just Sunshine, Qirong, and Paradise Manor, sounds a lot of therapy for this. And we'll be able to watch it and compare as we go. But the only thing I'm kind of concerned about as a reactor is I know some people have been anime, or in this case, Donghua only. They've not read the book. So my only hesitation at this point that I'm trying to figure out what I want to do is, what do I do? Do I go into the episodes and act and talk about things as they come, like we've all read the novel at this point? Or do I do like I've done in other series and have like a spoiler corner where we talk about connections? Or do I give a disclaimer saying I'm going to be talking about the novel too? I don't want to like exclude people that haven't read the novel, but at the same time, a lot of us have read the novel, so, or at least got up to volume 6 or volume 7, and we want to know what's going on, and we want to be able to talk about it. So I don't know. I'll probably ask Discord their thoughts about it in the next week or so, and what they think, like what they would prefer as well. So we'll see. But I've talked for nearly 20 minutes. We only have one chapter this week, so we probably won't have a lot of discussion maybe from it. But I'm really excited to see what we get. It's only one chapter, which again, treading new ground, but it's a special chapter. It's the 100th chapter, technically the 100th set of chapters that we've looked at in the story. Chapter 190, pages 237 to 260. So, should be a fun time, right? Should be a fun time, right? So we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to dive right into this sucker and see what we get. But thank you all for watching with me. I hope you enjoy the reaction. We're going to start it here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Chapter 190. Heart pierced by 100 swords. Savage ghost takes form. Trigger warning. Violence. Well, the last time we had a violence warning was when Shiwudu had his head cut off, right? A heart pierced by 100 swords. I don't like where this is headed. And a savage ghost takes form. Curious. All right. Why were they all staring at him like that? Suddenly, Xi Lian heard a whisper from the side. So similar. It's not just similar. It's the exact same. Is it really him? Oh, shit. Last time we were talking, I was like, I wonder if the people are going to recognize him as Xi Lian. Someone bluntly asked, you are that prince? Out of habit, Xi Lian started to say, I'm not. Yet before he could finish, he realized that the white silk he used to cover his face had been undone. In this moment, the thing that had completely tied down, the thing that had him completely tied down was that exact white silk. Is this Rui? Is Rui the white silk that he's been using to cover his face and had tied and now is tying him down? Don't tell me, I'll figure it out as we go. His face was now fully exposed in front of the crowd before him. XIE LIAN'S heart felt as if it was dangled by a single thread, but he steeled himself and he met those gazes. He didn't know if it was just his imagination, but he saw a tinge of suspicion stirring inside the looks that they gave him. But at least, perhaps due to the imminent danger at hand, the eyes didn't bear any hatred or anger as he had feared. However, in the next second, a wave of inhuman howls sounded from outside the temple. XIE LIAN whipped his head around and discovered that the source of the howl came from the face disease infectees they had previously knocked down. They had somehow regained their footing, and their number had increased. Hand in hand, they circled outside the Crown Prince Temple while chanting. One couldn't tell if they were performing a horrifying ritual or whether they were purely dancing as the crazed demons they were. The crowd inside the temple huddled together in absolute terror. A young child broke out in tears, and the parents took him in his arms while covering his eyes and ears. Every face in the room was stricken with horror. And what do we do? What do we do? Would these people be able to break in? Even if they don't charge in, since they're so close, would we also get infected? What would we do if we accidentally get infected? XIE LIAN fought against his bindings, but he wasn't able to loosen them in the slightest. It seemed that this white silk had already been tampered with, and had probably been injected with spiritual power. Oh, So it is Rui, isn't it? It's become Rui. With veins visibly seen on his forehead from the continuous struggle, he roared, "White no-face!" No response came. Instead, an icy cold hand patted his head. Oh my god, no! XIE LIAN froze, goosebumps rising. The scene that he saw as he turned his head made him paralyzed. No wonder the people below him were giving him strange stares. Not only was his face exposed, but White No-Face was seated right behind him in the darkness. In front of such an eccentric character dressed in white robes, no one dared let out a single breath, let alone move carelessly. As a result, the White No-Face barely regarded them as anything, and under everyone's watchful eyes, he helped XIE LIAN up. XIE LIAN came up to the sitting position from where he laid. Sitting on top of the altar, it seemed as if he was a bound, living statue. Oh my god, aside from moving his eyes and neck, he wasn't able to do anything else. Oh no! Although the situation was beyond eerie, the howling face disease infectees outside were more terrifying. The attention of the crowd below quickly returned to the disfigured creatures outside. Someone muttered, "From what I heard, anyone living within the same district can infect each other. This disease spreads exceedingly fast. Being in this close proximity, it's inevitable." At the thought that they would soon fall victim to the horrifying plague, a sea of despair filled the temple. One person suggested, "Well, why don't a few of us go out and knock some of those disfigured creatures and create an opening for the rest of us to escape?" However, aside from whether they would even be able to kill so many creatures, anyone that went forth would certainly be infected with the face disease. This was a primary example of sacrificing one's life to save others. With such an obvious fate, who would willingly volunteer? No one would. XIE LIAN would, if he could. I was about to say XIE LIAN would, if he could. But he was being restrained by the White No-Face at the moment. Although he could knock down 7 or 8 of them at a time, with 17 or 18 of them, it would be hard to stop them all. There was bound to be one that would break through and rush into the Crown Prince Temple. As for trying to kill the White No-Face, he'd be a fool to consider that. However, they needed someone to calm everyone down. XIE LIAN gathered his composure and spoke calmly. "Everyone, please don't do anything rash. It won't spread that fast. We still have time to think of a solution." But just by saying it won't spread that fast, it won't be enough to convince them fully. Surprisingly, the one who lifted the despair was none other than the White No-Face. He said icily, "There is a way to get rid of and cure the face disease." As soon as the words left his mouth, the crowd of people snapped their heads up. "It can be cured, how?" XIE LIAN felt his heart stop. White No-Face mused leisurely. "Well, why don't you ask your Highness? His Highness knows the method." All of a sudden, the 100 pairs of eyes zoomed in on XIE LIAN. The sharpness of the gazes made him instinctively recoil, but he was being blocked by White No-Face, who shoved him forward instead. He could hear the hopeful voices of few. "Oh, your Highness, do you really know?" Before XIE LIAN could answer, someone else excitedly shouted, "I heard from somebody that he does know." There were also some with suspicion. If he knew, then why did the capital still... Unless He knew but didn't tell anybody? Prince, please hurry up and tell us, yeah? Shilian denied immediately. I don't know. But the white no-face insisted, you lie. Fueled by anger, Shilian wanted to rebuke, but he was afraid that it would instead drive white no-face to leak more information. Though deep down he had a feeling that no matter if he denied it or not, the white no-face would say it regardless. After struggling for a while, he admitted defeatedly, there's no way. It's useless. After a pause, a sea of people started to stir. What do you mean useless? How would we know if it's useless if you don't even tell us? A drop of cold sweat slid down his forehead. Shilian thought, I really can't say it. He mustn't. If the truth should ever come to light, then it would all be over and done for. Within the crowd, someone had finally been fed up and jumped to their feet. Well, we're already on the doorstep of death. What is there to keep hidden? Unless you want all of us to wait here like sitting ducks until we die. In a gentle voice, the white no-face offered, well, then let me tell you. Be quiet, Shilian yelled. Naturally, his shout didn't carry a single ounce of threat, and white no-face ignored him and continued, do you know what kind of people within the capital were the least likely to be infected with the face disease? The crowd watched him intently. Though afraid to get close, they couldn't help but ask, what kind? Soldiers. It's over. The white no-face continued, why is it that it's the soldiers? Because they all did this one thing. Yet this thing isn't done by normal citizens, and that's why the citizens got infected with the face disease. Oh no, we didn't get this back in the earlier volume. We didn't get this, and so now we've been wondering what it's been this whole time. The crowd widened their eyes, and that thing is... Shilian lunged in his direction, but at most it was just an effort. The white no-face shoved him back. What is it, you ask? Manslaughter. It's over. He actually said it on top of the altar. Shilian's heart felt as cold as ice. After the initial shock, people repeated in disbelief, manslaughter? You have to kill to be immune? You have to kill in order to be cured? It must be a lie. Unfortunately, it wasn't a lie. This was the ultimate truth. Shilian had verified it himself. The hand stained with blood, the one that had ended a life, was immune to the face disease. Oh my God! Nobody expected this to be the answer to gaining immunity. Dumbstruck, they chattered among themselves, how can this be? I always thought it was odd since the beginning, but I haven't heard of anyone in the army getting infected. I'm afraid it's the truth. It's the truth. But doesn't that mean in order to prevent being infected, we have to kill someone first? Who do we kill? The person who posed the question immediately got lectured. What do you mean, who do we kill? Don't tell me you actually want to kill. The man didn't dare say anything more. However, these 100 pairs of eyes that were previously filled with simple terror and nothing else now contained many other emotions. Some with curiosity, some with suspicion. This was the situation that Shilian had feared. Once the cure for the face disease had been exposed, one thing would inevitably happen: the killing of one another. This was the sole reason that Shilian had kept the secret to himself after finding out the way to gain immunity. As long as you killed, you'd be safe from the disease. Perhaps the majority of people would be able to control themselves, but there was bound to be someone who'd be desperate enough to take the risk. Once the first blood had been spilled to prevent the disease, it'd be followed by a second, and then a third. As more and more were following suit, the world would be thrown into chaos. If that was the result, it would be better to guard it firmly and not let anyone know. Shilian smiled wryly. Now you understand why I said this method is useless. The crowd was silent. Shilian sighed and gathered his spirit. With a gentle tone, he soothed. No matter what, please stay calm. And don't act rashly or else you'll play right into this creature's hands. Among the crowd, there was a couple that looked of noble status. With a child wrapped within her arms, she wailed, well, how did it turn out like this? Why did it come to this point? Why does it have to be all of us people? We never did anything wrong. A nearby person snapped back, well, cry, cry, cry. What are you crying about? All you know is cry and cry. No one here did anything wrong. You think you're the only unlucky one? The wife retorted angrily, well, what? You're not even going to let people cry? What's the use of crying to the point that it turns into a nuisance? You might as well shut your mouth. It was unbelievable that a fight could break out for such petty reasons. With everyone on the edge of an emotional breakdown, a small touch would set fire immediately. Xi Lian was quick to pacify. Well, stop arguing, stay calm. Only a calm mind will bring the solution. However, the more he tried to calm the crowd, the more agitated they became. Stay calm? How can we become calm in a situation like this? If you're so calm, why don't you think of something? Let's see what you've got. Xi Lian was silenced by the question. What kind of solution was there? None. He dug through his mind desperately for an answer, even to the point where he felt as though his mind was on the verge of exploding. But he wasn't able to think of any way to resolve the situation in front of him. Suddenly, he felt a pinch on the side of his cheek. A hand cupped his face and twisted it to face the audience below the altar. Xi Lian's eyes widened in confusion. An icy cold voice behind him sounded, "Who to kill? Upon seeing this face, do you still not know who to kill?" With such a question being asked, not only did the movement stop from below the altar, but even the ring of ghost fires that hung above had halted. White No-Face reminded them softly, "Did you forget? He's a god." Which means... Before he could hear the rest, Xi Lian felt a wave of coldness wash over his chest. Stunned, he gazed down and saw the tip of a pitch-black sword pushing out from his abdomen. The blade was long and slender, its body colored as deep as black jade. The ridge reflected the light in the form of a crisp silver line. The cold steel was every bit as dangerous and icy as the coldest winter night. It was without a doubt a rare and treasured sword, the exact kind Xi Lian would rack his brains on obtaining and never let leave his grasp. Unable to move his gaze from it, the tip of the sword started to slowly inch back until it disappeared from his abdomen once again. "His body is immortal," the White No-Face finished. Before anyone had a chance to react, the White No-Face tossed the blade towards them. Clang! The point pierced the ground and stood tilted before the numerous pair of eyes, its thick, frigid aura slowly seeping out. "Oh my god, no, stop! No! No!" A gush of blood rushed up his throat, and the ball of ghost fire flew to him as if it was trying to cover his wound. Xi Lian choked on the blood and grimaced, You! There were lights dancing in front of his vision, and as if suddenly enraged, the ghost fire shot straight at the White No-Face. However, the ghost caught it effortlessly and held it captive in his palm. "Take a good look," he said. "Oh my god!" In the next second, with his other hand, he yanked Xi Lian's face to face him. "What about me? Aren't you the one who proclaimed that you wanted to save the common people?" Xi Lian reasoned, "But He never thought that under this type of situation, he would use this sort of method to save people." Below the altar, there were already people who were scared to tears by the bloody scene, but there were also others who were daringly watching on. Would he really not die? It's true, take a look, there's barely any blood. He's still alive, breathing as before. Xi Lian was racked by another intense, painstaking cough. Someone clarified, "So in other words, even if we kill him, he wouldn't die?" "That's great!" The one who cheered got scolded. "Great, what's so great about it?" The scolded person said quietly, "Well, since he wouldn't be able to die, then don't we now have a solution?" But to stab someone, that's too. But he's a god. Even if he's stabbed, he still wouldn't die. We're just common folks here, but if we get infected by the face disease, our fates are sealed. Watching the struggle unfold, the White No-Face mocked, "The common people are here, waiting for you to save them. Please, go ahead." Flames of anger lit up in Xi Lian's eyes. "The only way to save the common people is to eradicate a twisted monster like you." The White No-Face sneered. "What's the matter? Your Highness, didn't you confidently say that you won't be able to die? You couldn't possibly be scared now. Since you won't be able to die, then sacrifice yourself and relieve others of their sufferings. Isn't that a delightful thing?" Xi Lian spat. "Was this your plan all along? You think that everyone in the world is as sadistic as you?" True to his words, the expressions of the people below weren't the ecstatic ones that people wore at the thought of being rescued. Instead, it was hesitation. There were conflicting thoughts, and none of them were able to land on the same opinion. Yet at the same time, no one dared to pull out the black blade. As if reading his mind, the white little face laughed out loud. He shook his head disapprovingly and sighed, "Oh, you stupid, stupid, foolish child." Shilian turned away his head and refused to let the other pat him. He barked, "Get lost!" White No Face pitied. "You think they don't want to do it? Wrong. It's not that they don't want to. It's solely because no one wants to be first. That's all." There was a painful cry that erupted from under the altar. The noble-looking wife from before cried, "My child! My child!" The child in her arms wailed uncontrollably as bumpy dark spots started rising from his chubby arm. The people around them immediately backed away, leaving an empty gap in between. "This is bad! The kid is infected!" There was an emptiness in the couple's eyes. The two exchanged a look and jumped to their feet. They walked in front of the altar, pulled out the black sword from the ground, and held it within the child's hands. "Oh my God!" Grimacing, they lunged at Shilian. The black blade was exceedingly sharp, for when Shilian felt the excruciating pain explode from his abdomen, the couple had already pulled out the sword and dropped it to the ground with a loud clang while continuously apologizing. "Oh, we're sorry, our child is still young. There was really no other way. We're sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry." As they tried to atone for their actions wearing ashen expressions, they bowed many times in front of Shilian before returning to the crowd with their child. With thick layers of blood clogging up his throat, Shilian was about to throw up until he heard the white no-face snicker behind him. He forced down the mouthful of blood and hissed, "What are you laughing at? You think you got what you wanted? This was all forced by you." The ghost fire within the ghost's hand flickered even more fiercely. Taking his time, he explained, "Humans need force in order to reveal their true selves." Among the 100, there was now one person who wasn't afraid of the face disease anymore. Seeing the dark print slowly fading from the child's arm, the people around them swallowed heavily in silence. After a long while, under the dead silence, a young man finally stepped up. With thick skin, he walked towards the altar. He bowed several times with his hands clasped in front of him, and he begged, "I'm sorry. I don't want to do this. I really don't want to do this, but I don't have any other way. I just got married. My mother and my wife, they're still at home waiting for me." Word by word, he couldn't continue any further, so he shut his eyes, raised his sword, and thrust it towards Shilian. But because his eyes were closed, the sword tilted to the side and punctured Shilian's side instead. When he opened his eyes, he realized the spot wasn't fatal. In a moment's panic, he pulled out the sword frantically, and with trembling hands, he stabbed again! Shilian gritted his teeth to prevent any sounds from coming out, let nothing more than a small whimper after the 2 consecutive jabs. A stream of fresh blood seeped out from the side of his lips. It was true that he wouldn't die, but that didn't mean he wouldn't feel the pain from the wounds. The sound of every inch of flesh that had been tangled by the weapon, the feeling of every bone being scraped made him crazed. Wishing for death just to be relieved from the torture, when it came to this he was no different than a mortal. When the second person finished his business, he stepped down as well, but this time without giving a single bow. The expression he wore on his face was a mixture of regret and joy from the deed he committed. It was hard to say which was more dominant. Once he retreated back to the group, the silence returned. Not long after, a few more people looked as if they wanted to stand up with reasons of their own. However, before they could rise, a person interrupted, "I can't stand this anymore." The crowd turned to the direction of the voice, and Shilian too lifted his head. The one who spoke was the buff street performer. He scolded, "Are you honestly doing everything this monster tells you to do? From what I see, he's just babbling nonsense. Even if it was true, just because he can't die doesn't mean that this isn't murder." The bystanders around him advised him, "Buddy, wake up. Everyone here is about to die." The street performer defended, "Aren't I here too? Wouldn't I die too? But did I do anything?" That shut a few up. But a split second after, someone accused, "A person like you probably doesn't have any elders or children in your family, right? Every man for himself, but a lot of us here have a family to look after. How can we be compared to you?" The street performer pointed at the couple that were the first ones to go up and said, "It's true, I don't have a wife and son. But even if I had to die, I would never let my son see me resort to using those methods, let alone guide him hand in hand in doing it. If your child grows up to be a criminal, it's the parents who are to blame. If you're that eager, why not let your child take a stab at you? The wife had a face full of misery. Don't curse my son. If you want to curse, curse at me instead. The husband was furious. Have you lost your mind? You want my son to kill his own mother and father? How immoral. The street performer probably didn't understand what the word meant and retorted, killing is killing. At least it can be called courage if you let your son kill you. Speaking of which, why don't you guys go for that strange creature in the mask? Upon hearing that, the white no-face burst out into laughter. The crowd was scared and furious. Their fear went towards the monster, and their anger was directed at the street performer. They lowered their heads and chided, "You, shut your mouth!" What if they had accidentally angered the monster? The street performer understood immediately. Oh, so you don't have the balls to kill the big evil guy, and instead choose to stab another. Unable to suffer through the humiliation from a mere brute any longer, a person challenged, "This buddy has been preaching endlessly, and here I thought he might be someone special. Look at him now, with a ghastly face as devoid of blood. I'd say he probably has a couple days left at most. And that's why he dares criticize us all without a care in the world. If you're so righteous, why don't you sacrifice yourself to help us fellas here?" The street performer corrected, "I don't want to sacrifice myself, but neither does everyone else. Who does? Do you? Do you? But at least I won't stab anyone." Someone said, "But he's different." "How so?" "He's a god. To save the common people, he said so himself. Also, he can't die." The street performer was about to argue back, but XIE LIAN couldn't hold back any longer. He coughed weakly and called out, "Buddy, hey buddy." He opened his mouth, but as a result of the stabs prior to this, the sound that came out was many folds fainter. The street performer whipped his head around, and XIE LIAN's voice was filled with gratefulness. "Thank you, but it's okay." If he continued, then he'd probably get beaten up. XIE LIAN recalled that all the grave internal wounds that this man carried was due to their competition in the past. Guilty at heart, he added, "Thank you. The boulder-shattering injuries that you received from before, have they healed?" "Ah, what are you saying? How can I be hurt? Boulder shattering is my life skill!" the buff man exclaimed proudly. Seeing the man had refused to lose face even in a situation that was practically the same as spitting out a mouthful of blood while saying, "I'm completely fine," XIE LIAN wanted to laugh. Suddenly, a person pointed at the street performer and screamed, "It's spreading! It's spreading!" XIE LIAN was stunned. And as was the street performer. Following the direction of the finger, the street performer touched his face, and as expected, he felt something uneven. The people around him immediately distanced themselves. XIE LIAN opened his mouth, wanting to call over the street performer, but to do what? To stab him with the sword too? The words were lost in his throat. In a moment of hesitation, the street performer stroked his face several more times before dashing out of the temple. Seeing the event unfold, XIE LIAN called after him, "Where are you going? Come back! If you don't treat it, it will spread!" But the man ran faster and hollered back, "I'm not coming back! If I said I won't do it, then I won't do it!" Soon after, his figure disappeared. The disfigured creatures around the temple somehow knew that the man was now one of them and didn't block his path. XIE LIAN continued to call out until he wasn't able to see his shadow anymore. The people below the altar muttered, "It's over, he's gone. That stupid idiot, it'll spread regardless where you go. It's already too late, he's already infected. He couldn't possibly have gone down the mountain to kill, right?" However, the words the buff man said prior to his departure held the people in the temple at bay. Time had passed, and no one went up to pick up the sword. The situation was momentarily paused. XIE LIAN couldn't tell if he felt joy, hesitation, or fear, but most importantly, he didn't know what to do next. As he was fighting to clear his mind, someone stood up. "Can I say something?" It was a middle-aged man. XIE LIAN looked up and found the man to be somewhat familiar, but he couldn't recall where their paths had crossed. While trying to remember, the man announced, "In all honesty, he tried to rob me before." It was that guy. The crowd was shocked. "Rob? Isn't he a prince? Isn't he a god? To commit robbery?" The guy confirmed that's the absolute truth. "So, what do they exactly want to say?" "Nothing else. I just want to remind everyone that he tried to steal." The man crouched down again after he finished the statement. The temple fell into a solemn silence after the outburst. With that single statement, it had planted a seed of darkness within their hearts to steal. Suddenly, another howl came from under the altar. Someone shrieked, "My leg! My leg! It feels strange!" Again, to their surprise, it wasn't only one person. At the same time, another person cried out, "Me too! My back! Someone help me take a look at my back!" No one dared to come close to the two, leaving the two to inspect themselves. One rolled up their pant leg and the other took off his top. After taking a clear look at the state of their bodies, the rest of the people started screaming in fear. The faces on those two people's bodies had gained complete shapes. How did it grow so fast? Did you guys forget? We've already spent quite some time in here. But how did they not notice? It's not grown in an obvious place, and it's only a bit itchy. How would they know it'd turn into this? It's over, it's over. We probably already have it growing on us. Everyone, quick, do a checkup. Take a good look at your body. It was pure chaos inside the Crown Prince Temple. Screams pierced through the air upon inspection. As expected, there were already quite a lot of people that had faces appearing all over their bodies. It was just that they hadn't noticed them before. Now they'd taken a look, they realized that these new faces were completely developed, with all 5 facial features. As if knowing the situation, the disfigured creatures outside the Crown Prince Temple danced even wilder, hand in hand. Oh my God, yet inside a thick fog of dread spread rapidly in all directions. Xi Lian's heart pounded nonstop, like it was about to break through his chest. From what he remembered, the face disease took a while to spread. Why was it spreading so fast now? The white no-face. It must be the white no-face. He snapped his head the direction of the cold-eyed spectator that had initiated all this. Before he could open his mouth, someone shot up. Panting heavily, the person with reddened eyes criticized, "You're a god, you're a prince, yet you dare commit robbery?" Xi Lian was dumbfounded. Not understanding why the man brought up the incident out of all things, he replied, "I." The man cut him off sharply. "We pray to you." "And what did you do? Rob. What did you bring? A plague." "He brought the plague?" Shock was written across Xi Lian's face. "Me? It's not me. I only..." They'd finally arrived at the point where the people's patience had reached its absolute limit. With red coloring the rim of their eyes, the 100 people surrounded him. The one that was closest pulled out the leaning black sword from the ground. Xi Lian stopped breathing. The man grasped the black sword shakily while mumbling, You need to ask for forgiveness, right? You need to atone for your sins, right?" The dark blade emitted a terrifying aura, and Xi Lian's fear had soaked to its peak. There were so many people. If every single one of them were to stab him with the sword, what would he become by the end of all this? Aside from the thought of being punctured countless times and leaving nothing but thousands of holes and an indistinguishable pile of flesh, there was something else that he feared even more. He felt that if he was to let them do what they wanted, there was something in his heart that would never return to his original state. Unwilling to think any further, he couldn't help but cry out, "Help!" But before the phrase, "help me," could leave his throat, the same icy black blade was thrust into his body once again. Xi Lian's eyes widened in horror. The razor-sharp sword was roughly pulled out. The next person followed without a second wasted, and the next stab was practically shoved into the same spot. The sound locked in Xi Lian's throat and finally broke free, and a long, painful scream tore through his body. The scream was so piercing that the people around him felt goosebumps. There were some who closed their eyes and turned their faces away. "Don't let him cry out. Let's speed this up and get the job done fast." Xi Lian felt someone had muffled his mouth and restrained his hands and feet. The person ordered, "Hold him down and don't let him fall. Also, don't stab in the wrong spot. If it's not fatal, it doesn't count. Line up one by one. No cutting in line. I told you guys not to cut. I was here first. Which area is fatal? How would I know if it counts or not? Whatever you do, just aim it at the heart, the throat, the abdomen. If you're not sure if you stabbed a fatal area, just do it again. No way. If it gets more than one turn, where would others stab?" The initial hesitation and reluctance reduced to nonchalance. The more time that passed, the more fluid their movements became. The endless in and out movements of the sword, Xi Lian's eyes were wide open and fat droplets of tears rolled down his face. Deep inside his heart, there was a voice that was silently screaming and howling, "Help me! Help me, help me, help me, help me, help me, help, 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 help me! It hurts, 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 it hurts. Why can't I die? Why can't I die, die. He wanted to wail the most tragic sound, but he couldn't find one word in his throat, for it probably had been sliced through already. He wanted to go wild from the pain. It was as if he was suffering all the pain from multiple lifetimes, and that from now on, he wouldn't be able to feel any more pain. He couldn't see anything. The world was pitch black, other than the ball of fire that was burning furiously and was nearby. It grew brighter and stronger. Yet within the palm of the white no-face, it wasn't able to escape. He couldn't hear his own heartbreaking scream, but instead he heard the sound of another heart-wrenching wail, and it seemed as if it came from that ring of flames. Although it didn't come from him, the pain that he could hear was the same as his, as if he was the one that made that sound. In the end, he wasn't able to hold on to his sanity any longer. There was a mumbling in his throat, and his consciousness completely shattered. At the same time, an explosion blew from within the Crown Prince Temple, and a wave of raging flames gushed out. There was a mixture of low and high-pitched screams. The scorching fire roared, lighting everything in flames, making it impossible for anyone to escape. The ghost fire flickered vividly, and in an instant, the 100 living bodies that resided inside the Crown Temple were burned to 100 sets of charcoal black bones. When the flame gradually subsided and regathered, that original small ball of ghost fire had already vanished. In its place stood a vaguely shaped silhouette of a young man. The youth dropped down to his knees in front of the scorched black surface of the altar. He bent over deeply, clutching his head with both of his hands, and he bellowed in immense and devastating pain. He didn't dare look at what had become of the person lying on the altar, because what laid there didn't look human anymore. Bones and skulls scattered across the interior of the Crown Prince Temple. The white no-face cackled uncontrollably as he turned around and exited the temple. The rage of fire didn't only stop at just this Crown Prince Temple. Even the frenzied, disfigured creatures outside had turned to a pile of dried corpses and waste. As if blind to it, the white no-face walked past these charcoal ash-like remains. This entire forest, no, this entire mountain, trembled and mourned in agony. Countless black shadows flew up to the sky. They were the souls that were scared witless of this now lifeless land and were scrambling to escape. A strong gust of wind scattered them all in different directions. Above the Crown Prince Temple, a gigantic layer of black clouds was rumbling in restlessness. Slowly rotating, it resembled a colossal demonic eye. This was the birth of a malicious creature, the signs of a savage ghost taking form. What are we going to talk about again? Well, I wondered, after finishing this chapter, how many people would look at this thumbnail and go, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. What do we say? What do we say in this self-contained chapter? There are a few questions I have with this chapter and why. And I feel like the answer could be in itself, but the only thing that roughly gets answered in this is possibly Rui's origins. Possibly. We think that there is the silk piece of silk that was wrapped around XIE LIAN'S face. It's imbued with spiritual energy and used to bind him and keep him from moving, which is essentially what Ruyi is. So it is very possible that Ruyi was a piece of Xi Lian's silk that Bai WuXiang gave a consciousness to. Which is the most messed up thing, because I really like Ruyi. He's a sweet little puppy dog, and I'm like, the fact that Bai WuXiang is weird. And I'm not just saying that for the chapter. Bai WuXiang was terrifying in this chapter. Bai WuXiang was disturbing. There was a part of me reading the chapter that wanted to like add the Valley Girl slang to whatever Bai WuXiang was saying, but then I was like, now's not the time, because it was just absolutely terrifying. And Bai WuXiang takes Xi Lian's proud words and says, oh, like, are you sure? And then just spits it right back up. So, the idea that this crown temple is just completely demolished on top of this mountain, and then above it is swirling around this big vortex of black smoke, that the center of it looks like Eming's eye, is terrifying. That it just looks like Eming's eye at the center of all this black smoke. And it's the idea of WuXiang becoming from a ghost fire. He basically did like a Pokemon. He evolved from a ghost fire. He's now in his second form, which is that of a wrath or a savage, and is the boy. So we can assume that the boy version of the wrath or the savage ghost that WuXiang has become from the ghost fire, we can assume that this boy ends up going to Mount Tonglu and ends up becoming the Supreme. This is the boy that ends up going to Mount Tonglu, becomes WuXiang, right? The question is, we still have this big gap of, well, it doesn't seem like he became a Supreme that long ago. So what all ended up happening in the meantime? And I'm assuming that we still have the rest of this volume, Volume 7 and Volume 8, to figure that out. But yeah, it's apparent that now WuXiang has entered the second stage. The thing that gets me out of all of this is, why was Bai WuXiang okay with this? This is, I feel like Bai WuXiang's biggest error is Bai WuXiang he didn't see this as a threat, right? He thought it was hilarious that this little ghost fire was trying to protect Xi Lian and was useless. He thought it was hilarious. And he's like, oh, just shut up, little ghost fire. And then I feel like it's not Bai WuXiang intentionally that triggered WuXiang's evolution from the ghost fire to that of the savage ghost. But instead, it was all of the horrible things happening to Xi Lian that WuXiang just couldn't stand anymore, and he triggered his own evolution. The thing about it is, Bai WuXiang doesn't consider it a threat. Bai WuXiang's like, oh no, another savage ghost that's been infected into the land. Ha ha ha, won't have anything to do with me. I really hope that the irony of this all is that Bai WuXiang created his own destroyer. I really hope, because I'm sorry, how WuXiang has been remotely as calm as he was on Mount Tonglu with Bai WuXiang as he was. How that even was possible, I don't know. Whenever WuXiang learned that Bai WuXiang was posing as Fengshen and Muqing, I'm surprised, like, to quote Detox, I'm surprised he didn't come through the damn mirror and go after him. Like, I'm surprised that WuXiang didn't just annihilate him. But it could be that Bai WuXiang is crazy strong and WuXiang didn't want... I think the big thing of it is that WuXiang is so adamant about keeping Xi Lian safe that at the moment in Mount Tonglu, when they were facing off against Bai WuXiang, who was posing as Fengshen and Muqing, WuXiang didn't want to get in a situation where he ended up getting tied up with Bai WuXiang and Xi Lian was open to get hurt. So I think that's the thing. I think if Bai WuXiang was around and it was just him and WuXiang would try to beat the ever-loving daylights out of him for all that he's caused for Xi Lian. I think that's the case, right? But what gets me is that Bai WuXiang, it's almost like he makes WuXiang be this savage ghost, and he's like, oh, whatever, it's just another savage ghost, and doesn't realize how much WuXiang loves Xi Lian. he doesn't realize what he's created and doesn't realize that this could be his undoing. Because even Bai WuXiang, when Xi Lian falls into the kiln, Bai WuXiang's like, oh, I kicked him out. I kicked him out of the kiln. He's not here. Like WuXiang wasn't a threat, you know? So Bai WuXiang doesn't feel threatened by WuXiang, which is amazingly horrific because everyone else is drop dead terrified of him except Bai WuXiang. So, well, we're getting our origins out of the way, right? We're getting that out of the way. I'm not going to erase that or Rui until we go a little bit further because I want to be sure. But, and then Ming, we think is, I'm curious to know the sword that stabbed Xi Lian. The sword that stabbed Xi Lian. We don't get a picture last set, but you sadistic artists, you draw Xi Lian and it's like the most horrific picture ever. They drew him getting stabbed with the sword. It's a very slender sword. It almost looks like a stick. It's so slender. And you can see Bai WuXiang holding WuXiang in his hand. Oh my god, terrifying. But I'm wondering if Bai WuXiang took the sword that stabbed Xi Lian and combined it with this eye and made Ming. If Ming was created from the sword that had stabbed Xi Lian and in his own eye. And he put his own eye in it like to control it, and it transfigured the shape of it to look more like a scimitar. I don't know. The blade that struck Xi Lian over and over again was not a scimitar. It was a regular sword. So I don't know. Also, Bai WuXiang has access to deadly swords like Jun Woo. So there's another little comparison to him. So that's interesting. But yeah, this chapter was insane. It was so engaging to read because you're just like, what the hell's happening? But it was so terrifying because last week I was like, oh, this is the lowest we've ever seen Xi Lian. And this volume's not over, so I don't think this is the lowest we've seen Xi Lian. No. This is probably the physically worst we'll ever see him. Probably the physically worst we'll ever see him, but spiritually, mentally, I feel like the worst is yet to come. Because what's so terrifying is that Xi Lian, we get so many callbacks. What's so terrifying is that Xi Lian has wanted to save the common people. That's been his goal from the start. And Bai WuXiang's like, you don't understand. The common people aren't worth you saving. They are kind of shit. But not all of them, right? That's the point. Not all of them are. And what's interesting is this kind of goes back to when the Goshi was talking to Xi Lian. And Xi Lian, when he first found those people that were, when he first found the people that agreed with him in the streets, he was like, oh, Goshi, I found the people that agree with me. I'm right in whatever I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. And the Goshi was like, yeah, you found that group of people, but not everybody is reflective of the same ideology. And Xi Lian was like, yes, they are. And he like just trounced off. And the Goshi was like, and now we're kind of seeing that come back, where Xi Lian, the people that he trusted before, this is a different group of people, still his people, but he's like, oh, these people don't agree. No. And it's the idea of are the common people worth saving? It all ties very interesting to the religious aspect of it, because the heavenly officials, they don't get involved in the affairs of mortals. Typically, it's just they help out the people that pray to them, right? Because that gives them power. But they don't get involved in the common people's issues because they don't have a right to. And that kind of it all comes back to Xi Lian and God. It's like Bai WuXiang is like trying to teach him this horrible lesson of not trusting the people that you're supposed to save. And that's just, and it's the thing about it is Xi Lian's right. It was a forced situation where if it had just been like under normal circumstances, I'm sure everything would have been fine. But there was a claustrophobic angle to it. There was the idea that Bai WuXiang was accelerating the human face disease. There was the idea that these people were all crowded around and had doubts and suspicion. Like, the circumstances were not conducive towards rational behavior at all, right? I think it should also be known that Bai WuXiang is the cause of the human face disease, and that it's terrifying that the cure for it, because then we go back to the third volume, right? The cure is murder. That is, we go back to when he first told Xi Lian. Xi Lian's like, no. And he's like, I know why the soldiers aren't getting it. And God, it didn't hit me back then. I was like, well, why aren't the soldiers getting it? What have they done that the others haven't? They've killed. That's what it is. I think of the military, you know, in modern military, not all people in the military kill. There's people that are intel, people that are doctors, people that, you know, just fly planes, you know. There's a chance that you will find a military person that has not killed someone in modern times. But during the Yongan War, yeah, everybody was killing everybody. So chances are that, yeah, the people there had murdered someone. And it's absolutely terrifying. And Xi Lian, it all makes sense now why he didn't want to tell anybody. Because he's like, the moment during a war-torn country that I tell them the way to stop this disease is to murder someone, mass chaos will induce and people will die left and right. We'll be killing each other. We can't do that. But Bai WuXiang, I think another reason why Bai WuXiang just laughs as he leaves this entire situation is because he's all about chaos. I mean, he is obsessed with Xi Lian, but he wanted to break him. He wanted to break him. He's yandere for Xi Lian, but he wanted to break him. He wanted to be like, oh, you think you can't die? Oh, that's great. So if you can't die, it's okay if you just keep feeling pain, right? Ah. And so then, like, he wanted to mentally break him. And the sad thing is, what I'm afraid of is that it has. I'm afraid that Xi Lian, it's just, he's snapped. Because there was a moment where Xi Lian's like, if this goes down, there's going to be a part of me lost. Because, yeah, it's one thing back at Land of the Tender when he stabs himself to rid himself of the desires that he was feeling. It's one thing to do that once, and he knew he was doing it to himself. But there is a very good chance that having all these people stab him over and over and over again is going to break something in him, even if it's something as simple as his empathy, right? Because so far, Xi Lian has been incredibly empathetic towards others. He's been fighting for others, sharing in their plights, etc. And the fact that this has happened and it's the worst case scenario, he may not feel as empathetic as he did before, because he's like, well, look what that got me. And we already know Xi Lian was at his lowest point when this happened, so he wasn't in a good place mentally to start, and now he most certainly is not in a good place mentally. So I mean, the thing about it is that Xi Lian now is compassionate and kind. If you notice though, he does not involve himself in affairs. Unless once WuXiang shows up and then we have Bai Wu involved and then that all starts that, right? But for 800 years or so until WuXiang shows back up, until he ascends again, right? Until he ascends the third time. That's when he gets involved, right? So before his third ascension, I would say for 300 years. 300 years before that third ascension, he just doesn't get involved. And I would say that probably for that 500-year period before before Yongan, he didn't get involved, or before the second ascension and afterwards, he didn't get involved either. He was just like, I don't want to get involved in anything because... Now, I don't know what's been happening with the mom and the dad and Feng Xin while all this has been going on. We don't know how much time is passing while all this is going on. So I'm assuming maybe we'll find out next chapter. Because it seemed like Bai WuXiang was leaving. It seemed like he was leaving the scene being like, well, that was fun. I tortured Xi Lian and taught him a lesson. And I created a savage ghost while I was here. Guess my work is done. And then it's like Tuxedo Man's like, you didn't do anything. And he's just like, haha, and then goes away. I feel like Bai WuXiang's just leaving. I've tortured Xi Lian. What fun is there now? But, oh my God. So then what? What about the parents? What about Feng Xin? Where do we go to from here? But I feel like that Xi Lian just is... I'm very scared to see what the state of Xi Lian is after this. I mean, the only thing that keeps me somewhat hopeful is knowing how he is in the present. that he is compassionate and kind and maybe forgetful. But can you blame him for being forgetful now? No! Now, whenever I think back to the early volumes where he's like, oh, my memory's not very good. I don't like thinking about the past. And I was like, well, why, Xi Lian? Now we know why he doesn't like thinking about the past. Because he's like, that was a bad time. I don't want to relive that. Nope. And hearing about Bai WuXiang makes him feel very bad about it. So yeah, it sucks. And so the only thing, like I said, knowing that he is the way he is now, and we do know that he did try to get involved a few times in the future. We tried to get involved in Yong'an. That ended poorly. He tried to get involved in Banyu. That ended poorly. And then he just gave up again and was like, well, never mind. I tried to do something again. Didn't work out, so I'm just going to leave. And it's so sad because it's like even after everything he went through in this chapter, hundreds of years later, Xi Lian was still trying to help people. And it still didn't go well. And he still tried to do it anyway. Just, it's enough to make you, it's just enough to make you sick, right? The whole thing with this set of, this chapter, essentially with this set of pages, is the idea of just how quickly things can break down. And how Xi Lian's like, and the thing about it is, I think the people in the temple, if the human face disease hadn't been exacerbated like it had been, I don't think they would have stabbed Xi Lian. I think that they would have tried to escape, or they would have thought of another situation. But the urgency and everyone being kind of selfish for themselves and being like, we don't want to die. What can we do to not die? And then it's the fact, it was a number of factors there, right? Not only with the people, but it's the idea that Xi Lian couldn't die. It was just like, oh, well, since he can't die, I guess, it won't hurt, right? And there was that. And then there was the idea about the robbery and painting him as a bad person. And I was like, he didn't even rob that guy. He just tried to, but he didn't actually rob him. But then they used him and it made him a scapegoat, right? And that's commentary in itself about the idea of using people as scapegoats when they probably don't deserve to be. It's that idea. It's the idea of how desperate people can become. And there's the idea of self-sacrifice. Like Xi Lian reasons, if two people could sacrifice themselves for everyone else to get out, then it would have worked. But nobody wants to do that. And it was such a good commentary because so often we think, oh, well, I'll do that. And then when the time actually comes, you're like, well, I don't really want to. No, I don't really want to now. We're good with that. And so then it comes down to them questioning, and they all know it's Xi Lian at this point. The thing of it is, no one else will know that Xi Lian is the crown prince because they all dead. WuXiang burned them all to cinders. It was just like, it was like the first people on WuXiang's list to get rid of. It was like there was the 33 heavenly officials, and then the people that all stabbed, the 100 people that stabbed Xi Lian suddenly skyrocketed to the top of that list. And I don't know if WuXiang meant to kill them all in that moment, but they all burned up in the creation of him as a wrath ghost. They all burned alive. And so they're gone. So there's that. Oh my God. And then, oh my God, he's like, you lie. When the white no-face was like, you lie, I was like, oh, the words the white no-face said. And just to torture him. Just to cause chaos and torture him. It was awful. And the thing that makes me so sad is that while all this is going on, WuXiang as a little ghost fire is like trying to when Xi Lian first gets stabbed by the sword, WuXiang tries to cover up his wound to keep it from bleeding, and then he tries to lunge at Bai WuXiang and hurt him, and he's just like, no, get away, you're gonna sit here and watch. He's like, you're gonna watch him suffer. How Bai WuXiang has not been wrecked by WuXiang is beyond me. And if WuXiang finds out that Bai WuXiang has been torturing him again, you know what? I love Bai WuXiang as a character. He's an amazing villain. He's terrifying. But I want WuXiang to kick his ass so hard. I'm like, WuXiang, if you could just come down and help Xi Lian, beat the snot out of this guy, that'd be great. That if you could bring Junwoo with you, that'd be even better. Let you guys both beat him up. Let's do this together. Although I honestly want, in a perfect world, I want Xi Lian to defeat Bai WuXiang. In a perfect world, I want Xi Lian to live through what he said he was going to do and defeat Bai WuXiang himself. but I want WuXiang to be there to back him up. So we'll see how that ends up going, right? We'll see how that ends up going. And then, yes, God, it says in this version of the Ring of Ghost Fires, but in the actual text itself, when he's like, well, who do you think it's going to be the one that we kill? What does he say here? Who do you think it could be? It says that the little ghost fire started like just getting exceedingly worried that it was going to be Xi Lian. And then it was the street performer that Xi Lian battled against, that had that shattered the boulders on him, that Xi Lian sat down and put the slates on him over and over again until they were shattered. He's the one that stood up to Xi Lian. The idea that his enemy stood up for him, and he, who Xi Lian kind of got in an argument with and, you know, wrote off as just being a so-and-so, he actually stood up for Xi Lian and was like, no, this is murder. Murder is murder and it's wrong. And then when he gets infected by the human face disease, he leaves. He doesn't partake in the act of murder because he's like, I said what I said and I meant what I meant. And then he left. It's like, you don't expect that guy not only to come back, but to be the only one that stuck up for Xi Lian. And he wasn't one of the 100 that did that. Oh my God. He's like, you said you wanted to save the common people. God, Bai WuXiang is just vicious and cruel. He's like, and then, yeah, Xi Lian's like, the only way to save the common people is to eradicate a twisted monster like you. And he's like, well, didn't you say you wouldn't be able to die? Like, Bai WuXiang, such a villain. He's so cold and cruel and twists Xi Lian's words and targets him. It is just, oh, it's awful, right? You foolish child. And so it's funny that he goes from being kind of yandere for Xi Lian to just being kind of like condescending to him and being like, oh, you're just a kid, you wouldn't understand. I can't wait to find out more. Just not in this chapter. Not in this chapter. I'll never read this chapter again. I don't think I will. I'm not looking forward to... Star Ember is the only person that maybe can make this horrifically gory experience look pretty, but it's still not going to be good. And the Donghua, I don't know how we're doing that. It gave me very Game of Thrones vibes. There's a character in Game of Thrones that gets cornered by 100 people. It's the same scenario. He gets cornered by 100 people, and they've determined that he's a traitor and that he has to die, and their method of killing him is to stab. Each person takes a stab at him, right? But he is not in the same boat as Xi Lian. It's a different scenario. But I was thinking the entire time as Xi Lian's getting stabbed, I was thinking of that scene from Game of Thrones. But this, I would argue this is much worse than Game of Thrones, because even though Xi Lian is immortal, they start stabbing him in the face, in the abdomen, the chest. What do they say here? They're like, we have to, where do they go? They go to stabbing him, and they're like, it's that guy, the guy that he tried to rob. And he says, oh, instead, I'm going to go by this part here. They're like, just stab him in the heart, the throat, and the abdomen. If you don't stab a fatal area, just do it again and again. And they basically, like 100 people just, and they tied his hands and feet up and they gagged him so that he couldn't scream. And then he starts crying. And then he starts crying because he's getting stabbed. And the thing about it is, even though Xi Lian can't die, he's still feeling all of the pain of being stabbed. Like, just, And the idea that they basically, like, they miss and hit his side, they slash his throat, they basically stab him until he's a puddle of mush, until he's just nothing. Oh. And at that point, Xi Lian, where he's just begging someone to help me. I couldn't say all the It's Hurts and Helps Me's. I tried to do some of them, but I was like, oh no, this is too much. No. And then he's like, he just gurgled. And then the little ball of fire was growing brighter and stronger, but it wasn't able to escape. And then he heard a heart-wrenching wail. And it was WuXiang bursting into flames and becoming a wrath. Like, just and God, the idea that WuXiang suffered so much watching his gege be just turned into this inhuman pile of mush. And that pain from seeing his loved one be stabbed over and over again in front of his eyes was enough to make him turn. What do you say to that? What can we say? What can we say? But yeah, the idea that he burned everyone in the temple, all 100 of them. So it didn't matter. So that's the thing that's so insane about all of this. All of this happened with Bai WuXiang and him. All the people stabbed Xi Lian over and over again to save themselves, and it didn't matter because WuXiang killed them all. And Bai WuXiang's that's probably why he cackles. He's like, well, see, now they don't even die at all. They don't even live at all. Isn't that funny? You didn't save any common people. They're all dead. And then, yeah, Xi Lian, just the idea, he didn't dare look at what become of the person lying on the altar. What laid there didn't look human anymore. He dropped to his knees in front of the scorched black surface of the altar, clutched his head with both of his hands, and bellowed in devastating pain. Yeah, he watched his God be completely slaughtered. The scary thing about all of this is we don't know what's going to happen to WuXiang once he becomes a savage, if he's going to stick around with Xi Lian or if he's going to, like, leave. We don't know what's going to happen with Bai WuXiang. Is he going to come back? Is he gone now until he decides to pop back up again? The scary part is that we don't know how long Xi Lian is going to sit there on the altar until his body grows back. Because eventually we know his body regenerates at some point, but we don't know how long that's going to take. So, and what do we do with that? And Xi Lian, the worst part about this is I'm pretty sure the whole point was that Bai WuXiang wanted to break Xi Lian, and he wanted to teach him that these people aren't worth saving and that they aren't worth your time. And the sad thing is, I worry about Xi Lian when he comes back to life and back to where he can do things. I fear how he's going to act around Feng Xin. Like, is he gonna, how can he tell Feng Xin? How could you explain to someone what just happened in this chapter? How could you do it? How? What is he gonna say to Feng Xin? He's probably gonna be like, oh no, it was nothing. Sorry, I was gone for however long. What do you say? How's Feng Xin gonna react? What about his parents? What's been going on with them? Did WuXiang come back around? He said he wasn't, so probably not, but... One chapter. That's all it took, right? It was so heartbreaking seeing Xi Lian offer, and even him though, and I think that was one of Bai WuXiang's things, was he's like, oh, you're so self-sacrificing, but what about this scenario? And Xi Lian's like, who would want that scenario? Nobody would. And Bai WuXiang's like, well, that's your only option. It's so heartbreaking because it's Bai WuXiang trying to break Xi Lian's faith in people and humanity, and we don't know how good it worked, but I'm sure it worked somehow, right? And Xi Lian was already in a bad state as it was, and so this just makes it 1,000 times worse. Like I said, the only good thing that makes me feel not devastated as I could be by these chapters is knowing when we get back to him in the present, he is compassionate, he is kind, but in all honesty, he is pretty numb. He is pretty numb. Like now it all makes sense. Now that we've seen Xi Lian and we're kind of like, well, you're kind of numb and like desensitized to everything. Yeah. A wee bit. Like how would you experience something like this and not be broken completely? One thing is I'm going to wait a week until the Manhwa chapter comes out. For the next part, so I need a week to process this for sure. That Donghua is seeming more and more appealing as we go, right? Because this is oof. Next week's chapter set is going to be chapters 191, 192, and 193, which are on pages 261 to 298. So it was a big set of pages, and I didn't really want to put this on top of it. Glad I didn't. I need some feel good after what I've just read, that's for sure. And then the following week is a really big section. It's 5 chapters. We started out the series with 5. We started out volume 6 with 5 chapters. We're ending with 5 chapters. We have chapters 194, 198, 50 pages basically, pages 299 to 348. So the next 2 weeks are probably going to be really long. So be ready for that. Be ready for the next 2 weeks to be really long. I've talked for 30 minutes about this chapter, but it's mostly just misery, losing faith in humanity, and seeing the worst of humanity brought out by desperation and the desperate need for survival. And the thing about it that sucks the most is that there was always that hesitation to hurt Xi Lian because they thought he was good. They knew that they could murder him and he wouldn't die, but because he was a good person, they were like, I don't know. But the moment that one guy said, well, he robbed me, and they're like, oh, that seed of darkness that got planted within them, they're like, oh, well, you're not a good person then, so we can hurt you. And I feel like that's a big commentary too on how we don't want to hurt the good people, but people that have done bad, it's almost like, oh, they're fine, they deserve it. They can handle it. It's to atone for their sins, as that one person said. And it's like, nobody should have to go through that. It doesn't matter if you stole or not. No one should have to go through that. But yeah, Bai WuXiang. I underestimated how scary Bai WuXiang was until these chapters. This week and last week have definitely proven that Bai WuXiang is a force to be reckoned with. And I'm still like, I really hope that Bai WuXiang created WuXiang as a savage ghost and laughed it off thinking it was just funny. And I really hope that WuXiang and Xi Lian kick his ass. I really hope they beat him when we get back to the president. I'm like, kick his ass, kick him off Mount Tonglu, send him Team Rocket style, flying into the distance, have Junwoo have 1,000 arrows shot at him. You know, just get Bai WuXiang out of here. Oh my God. Like Xi Lian, it's just a sword. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. I don't want confirmation about Rui yet. I think it's Rui that is the little band of silk that came with Xi Lian. But man, for Xi Lian to deal with Rui all the time and not have a negative connotation with it because it was tied up during your worst days, that's something. But we'll see. So, but yeah, I'm gonna wait till next week to read the next set of chapters when we get a manual with it. So maybe that'll feel better. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. Sorry this wasn't a very long discussion this week, but I need to go watch something happy to finish my night out instead of going to bed after this. So I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back next week with chapters 191 to 193 of hopefully happier times with Heaven Official's blessing. Bye.